Welcome to the Ally Effect with Allyson Blythe, authentically living life your way. We all contemplate making changes in our lives that would allow us to live more authentically, but it can be hard to take action. Allyson is here to educate, equip, and empower you with the tools you need to start authentically living life your way. Get ready to eradicate your limitations and destructive patterns as you take full responsibility for your own happiness. This show is not just talk. It is conversation for profound self-awareness, acceptance, and appreciation, the key elements to stepping into the power as the creator of your very best life. The Ally Effect with Allyson Blythe starts now.
Hey everyone, and welcome. You're listening to The Ally Effect, authentically living life your way with me, Allyson Blythe, right here on Transformation Talk Radio. Stay with me for the next hour as we dive deep into this concept of authenticity and how I can help you explore a little bit more deeply. You can join me the first and third Thursday right here on Transformation Talk Radio as we dive into some rich conversation. We don't just brush the surface about authenticity. We really hold some topics about different ways that you can begin to build this thing, authentically living life your way. So today I want to shed some light, quite frankly, on me, who I am, where I come from, and offer some behind the scenes of why I believe so strongly in this thing called authenticity. I want to lift the veil and honestly level the playing field as we spend this time together and this powerful concept of authenticity. And it seems like it would be, if you remember when you were little, maybe you had this experience. I know I certainly did on several occasions. You were out and about and all of a sudden you recognize someone. There's someone over there and they have jeans on, or maybe you see someone and they're actually drinking a beer and you're like, wait a minute. I know that person, but who is that? Wait a minute, that's my teacher, right? Or that's my pastor. It's kind of this thing that people are out and about doing normal things, having the sense of like normalcy in their life. Well, people often respond to me in the very same way. Pretty surprised that I'm as real as I am, filled definitely with my own history, my own story, struggles, definitely dysfunction and issues. As a therapist, we are not immune to difficulties and struggles any more than a doctor would be immune to illness in any way. So it's with that, I want to drop the veil on this level of professionalism or esteem that somehow we are above these levels of ache that most people go through. I want an opportunity to practice what I preach and really live the terms of authentically living life your way and share with you as authentically as I possibly can. Raw and real sounds like a pretty beautiful concept. And yet what I find is that it's one of the scariest things you can actually be because it equates to vulnerability. And when you have one of those levels of exposure, sometimes you're opening yourself up. Typically, you're opening yourself, sometimes in a very public format like this, sometimes more just one-on-one. But that sense of being seen, intimacy, and the fear of other people's judgments, opinions, and feedback. Quite frankly, I've seen that go both ways. It can be wonderfully healing that someone can hold space for you and really validate and acknowledge your perspective and your hurt. And other times, not so much. It can actually be pretty tragic and add even more shame and humiliation, kind of adding so much more salt to the wound, teaching people to kind of stay pinched off in that sense of authenticity. There is definitely an illusion in this helping industry that we are somehow above dysfunction, hardship, and struggles, that somehow we manage to have it all together. Yeah, not so much. So I will often sit with clients and they will say things like, wait a minute, you deal with this, or you've felt this, or you've had this. And it's just a very firm nod that yes, of course. Yes, I've had that issue too. And I remember one of my very darkest seasons that I had exposed some thought and some circumstances to someone who was very near and dear to me. And her response, talk about adding salt to the wound. Her response was, Allyson, how could you let this happen, right? How could you let this happen? For goodness sake, you do this for a living. Ugh, right? So in those moments of shame and embarrassment and humiliation, someone really, just imagine a dog rubbing their nose in it. Have you had an experience like that where someone you're trying to expose and you're open and you're out there, and then suddenly someone rubs your nose in it, has this element of shame, further blame, or humiliation? Have you learned in lots of different capacities just to resist and block off any level of authenticity? If you think about that lowest rung of the hierarchy of needs, trust versus mistrust, it actually occurs during intimacy. I think that happens all the time in relationships, that we are assessing, can I trust? Is this safe? Or is there anything here that is not safe and I need to mistrust? I know for me, that was one of those moments where I just realized, like, it is not safe to expose. And yet I'm drawn to this principle of authenticity and believe so fully in it, because living behind a curtain is truly no way to live at all. I'm wondering for you, if you've had those moments of exposure in which you revealed yourself. Was it beautiful? Did you have someone who was willing to be able to hold that space? I'm wondering what message you actually received. And if there's a way that, if it was a pain point, if it was a painful message, is there a way that we can try again and practice that? So I want an opportunity to go first in order to kind of expose and allow the veil to be dropped in terms of this having it all together image, which I alluded to last week in trying to always perfect and perform. So I want to start with a quote. Last time I offered "to thine own self be true," and just such a powerful Shakespeare quote. And this quote is actually from Krieg Crippen. And I'm going to read it to you because it's a little bit long, so bear with me. You are being presented with a choice: evolve or remain. If you choose to remain unchanged, you will be presented with the same challenges, the same routine, the same storms, the same situations, until you learn from them, until you love yourself enough to say no more, until you choose change. If you choose to evolve, you will connect with the strength within you. You will explore what lies outside the comfort zone. You will awaken to love. You will become, you will be. You have everything you need. Choose to evolve. Choose love. Whew, Krieg Crippen, right? Like, again, I feel that one almost as much. My hope is that in this space, I can help you to choose to evolve out of those patterns of perfecting and performing, out of kind of living your life for so many other people. Last time I introduced that fun fact about the tattoo. And this is another fun fact that's not really so secret, but I love yoga. It's essential to my life, to my spirit, and definitely to my own mental health. But I'll be honest, it was about 15 years ago when I walked into my very first studio. I think my higher power really kind of stepped in to make this huge intervention in my life, because I won a certificate, and it was a free 30 days to a local yoga studio right here in Florence, Kentucky. And I was terrified. I was horribly overweight. I was very distraught. I was at the end of my rope, inside, outside, right? I was at the height of some of my pain and dysfunction. I was terrified to walk into that yoga studio. But maybe the winner or cheapskate in me, whatever, the bargain deal won out inside of me over the fear. Thank God that happened. I walked into that yoga studio, and I have honestly never looked back. The value of the things I have ever learned on the mat and the way that it translates to movement and experiences and relationships off the mat is wonderfully profound. And I will never also forget that I've since left that studio and moved to a hot yoga studio. And it was one Saturday morning many years ago. And I was at a 75-minute hot yoga class, right? Like, wow, that was a lot in and of itself. But we were trying to move into this pose called the half moon, if any of you yogis might know what I'm referring to. But it's this pretty significant balancing act where you're on one hand and one foot and twisted to the side and all that kind of stuff. And one of the things I love the most about yoga is that one of the things that they say often is just embrace the wobble, right? Like, don't try to perfect, don't try to perform. You're going to wobble. The whole point is learning and growing and stretching, and one day looks different than the next, and one side looks different to the next, right? It's not about comparison when you walk onto your mat. And so in this pose of trying to move into it, I was way wobbly. And the teacher, I could feel her presence. I could feel her walking over to me. And at the time, she didn't say a word to me, but all she did was put her hip against me, which allowed me to very solidly move into the movement, the pose more significantly, because she had stabilized me. She had allowed me just enough strength to move further into that. And I will never, ever forget what she said to me. She whispered very, very quietly, because it's a silent studio. She said, "Allyson, trust the process. You've got this. And you know what? I've got you." Oh my gosh, you guys, like, whoa, right? Embrace the wobble. I will never forget that experience, in the way that in our world and in our society, we are promoted to just have it all together. And we expose wobble to people, and we get criticized for that. On the yoga mat, I was embraced. I was solidified, right? With her support, her words, and her encouragement. My friends, you are being presented with a choice to evolve. And when you get wobbly, it's not if you get wobbly, but when you get wobbly, I promise you, I've got you. That's what this is all about. It's okay to wobble. None of us have to pretend that we all have it together, because we simply don't. One of the benefits of being a therapist is I get the gift of seeing behind everyone else's scenes, right? Like, the curtain comes down and I get to experience people's guts and glory, right? It's a beautiful, beautiful process, and holding space for people. So this is my opportunity. And though I won't go into all of the guts and glory, as I've said a couple times, I want to lift the veil and drop that image of having it all together, even as a therapist. I want to allow you into that space of seeing behind the scenes and kind of reconcile that cognitive dissonance that you actually might have, not only about who I am, but the reality that everyone else out there. Remember, we talked about social media and the image that people create, and actually just the real life facade that so many people are putting on. So I am Allyson Blythe. This is the Ally Effect, Authentically Living Life Your Way. We're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, I'll do it. I'll drop the offer the behind the scenes and drop the veil a little bit to help you see a little bit deeper into my world. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. We're back on the Ally Effect, Authentically Living Life Your Way. I want to make sure you know how to contact me. If you are wobbly and you need someone to hold some space for you, or you just have a basic question about this thing called authenticity, I want to make sure you know how to be in touch with me. I still have a landline where you can leave an old-fashioned voicemail, and I will get back to you, 859-341-7773. If you want to send me an email, please feel free to do that. I check that pretty consistently. Allyson Blythe at live.com, ALLYSONBLYTHE. And I'm on social media too, Allyson Blythe, life coach. If you want to check out my website and just read a little bit more about me, the courses that I offer, just this material, certainly feel free. That is AllysonBlythe.com. So here we go. I knew from the time I was a very, very young girl that I was destined for this work, that I was set on a path in order to just be a helper. I knew it. I was born that kid, the one who had a sensitive heart. I was a big thinker, a big feeler. I had just a high level of sensitivity. I could experience and understand certain things and energy from people. Now, much later in life, I understand that to be empathic wiring, which we are going to talk about too. I understand now that I was actually an empath. And even at a young age, being in tune to pretty significant things. I was always a helper. Stray animals, much to my parents' dismay, I was always bringing them home. Cats, turtles. I don't think I ever brought home a dog. I think I knew my lines. Rabbits, like different types of things, always trying to help. I was rooting for the underdog, no matter what, aligning and being friends with the misfits. And also, much to my parents' dismay, oftentimes bringing home the misfit boys too. Yeah, I'll talk about how that worked out. So understanding that, like, I took that helping concept and it was actually really beautiful. I think it's a very loving, but perhaps maybe very naive element about me. I had this comprehension or this belief system that two halves would make a whole, right? Like this romanticized version of what love really was. I mean, come on, we've got romance novels, we've got fairy tales that get implemented over and over and over for kids who are very, very young. We've got the movies. And you know what? In my generation, that Say Anything movie, the boombox experience, oh my gosh, right? Like if you haven't watched that, you'll know where some of my angst certainly came from, that a romanticized ideal, that it was kind of love that was able to kind of cure and fix and overcome everything. I was a social worker long before I got my degree. I would be up late nights, talking to friends till all hours, talking to them about their problems or their heartaches. I actually wanted to work in prisons. I really believed that we could take that love-wielding baton and just very gently apply it to people. Now, please don't get me wrong. I do believe that love is a incredibly profound ingredient to offer people, to yourself, to the world. And what I know now is that it's not the only ingredient, because quite frankly, that's what led to some of my dysfunction, is this concept of love. I would babysit. I had friends all over the place. I was friends with kind of all groups of people. And another fun fact, I actually wanted 99 kids. I landed at one. The 98 others probably went somewhere else in the world, but like I only had one. But when I was very little, I wanted to have 99 children. Again, just tons of love. I worked at a convenience store in upstate New York for from my high school career all the way through grad school. And I kind of have a hard time thinking about that experience because it was rough. Like, I'm not going to joke, like it was pretty significant. And I had the night shift and I was responsible for taking care of the late night hours of that store. But I had done it for so long that I had actually become part of the community. Those people mattered to me. I knew their names. I knew their families. I knew their struggles. I would often watch them count out their change at different times during the month in order to get enough money for groceries. I would watch them try to dole out their food stamps to try to understand what they could buy and what they couldn't. And talk about cognitive dissonance. As a manager of one of these stores, it was my responsibility to do what they would call facing the store. I was responsible for managing like pulling all the things to the front, making sure how the stock was, and checking expiration dates. And part of facing the store is that we were responsible for throwing away, disposing of, down the drain, in the trash, eggs, milk, cheese, meats, you name it. These families were struggling. They didn't have a way to consistently feed their food. Kids I knew, kids that were growing up right before my eyes. I began to run my own little, food bank or soup kitchen, like right out the back doors of that place. And there were many times that I was threatened to be written up. I was threatened to be fired. And I did not care. I couldn't reconcile throwing food away when people were hungry. So I could get on my soapbox about that still to this day. But, that was even probably 16, 17 years old when some of those efforts started. I did internships in inner city schools and soup kitchens and homeless shelters. I worked in residential centers where kiddos did not have the community, the support, the resources, or even the safety to maintain in their own households, right? So kind of the grit and glory of grassroots social work. And I don't know if a lot of people know this about me, but when I first started my career, right out of the gate, I actually did sex offender work. I worked with sex offenders, young, old, male, female, adolescents, you name it. I ran and was in charge of assessments and court evaluations and all kinds of things. even with the sex offender population. And I did that work and was excellent at that work until I simply couldn't do it anymore. Just became too much, right? But what it allowed me to realize is that no matter what people's behavior, I can tend to always see into their heart and understand what made them tick. I don't have to agree with what made them tick. I don't have to agree with what it is that they actually did, but really holding space and treatment for even that level of population and the way that people would kind of judge that or have shocked reactions to that. Those skills offered a beautiful career that honestly has helped me and helped thousands of other people. I've been launched into a career with that soft, tender, gentle heart. And it's been amazing for me. Over 30 years, I have been practicing social work and some life coaching too. The issue, though, is that when you take all of those professional skills and you're really good at it in work, and then you bring them into your personal life and you try to wield that same love baton and the helping mentality into your personal life, I would imagine a principal shouldn't principal at home, right? A manager probably shouldn't manage at home, and an officer probably shouldn't police at home, right? Like there's professional skills and there's personal skills. I took that same helping mentality and it allowed my heart to lead into many different life experiences and relationships. That's not all bad. It's actually been incredibly beautiful. I will still root for the underdog. I still have the ability and the space to hold for people who are in pain, who make decisions that are less than ideal. And yet kind of understanding that nowhere is there a relationship manual. Nowhere, right? Like we've got all kinds of books and resources and things, but there's never a concrete do and don't element that we learn from the time that we're very little. We are rarely taught about healthy relationship skills. And yet relationship is the fundamental level of every single thing we do. Okay. So I would wonder, as you kind of review your history and you look at some of your patterns, what's the energy you bring into relationship? I would question for you too, what's the health of your relationship? Last time we were kind of putting on a range. What's your range of authenticity? What's the range of your health, the health of your relationships? Would you note them to be really high and pretty successful and happy? Awesome, fantastic. My hope is that you can continue to build in terms of that authenticity. I wonder, what is it that was role modeled for you? I know that there was not a lot of healthy role models in my life for things like love, intimacy, connection, communication, right? So I wonder, as we move further into this process, I wonder for you, are you at a place where you are ready to evolve? Are you ready to embrace some change? And so as you think about that, what would that look like? Can you create a picture of what choosing evolving would actually look like? Are you really ready to do it differently? Because when it comes to authenticity, remember the exposure. I will not lie, there's a risk factor. Hopefully not here, right? Like we're not going to offer the risk factor here. This is why I'm offering this material, is because I want people to know and have community in order to do it safely. But are you ready to stand in the face? I think Brene Brown calls it like getting into the arena. Are you ready to get in the arena with me as we really practice this idea of authenticity and dropping the veil, not only in my life, but in yours too? As you start to look at the theme or the motive behind your relationships, how healthy would you gauge them to be? Just a little food for thought. All right. So I'm Allyson Blythe. This is the Ally Effect, Authentically Living Life Your Way. When we come back, I'm going to talk a little bit more about my history and offer some more behind the scenes. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. So we're back here on the Ally Effect, Authentically Living Life Your Way with me, Allyson Blythe. Today, I'm sharing, quite frankly, about myself, my story, and helping you try to understand a little bit about where I'm coming from in this journey of authenticity, and to understand why I'm so incredibly I'm so incredibly excited about the topic, that it's not just a concept to me. It's actually something that matters greatly to me in helping not only me live that way, but the people that I companion with in my practice. So the good news is that after 25 years, and that number seems to be growing, I might have to recalculate at some point, but there isn't much I haven't heard. Remember, I talked a lot about this idea of sex offender work and people sharing their deepest levels of shame, humiliation, secrecy, and the other side of that, people coming in to celebrate and acknowledge their greatest successes. The other week, I sat with a client and she literally was moving out of the country, right? And just embracing this lifelong dream. And month after month, we helped kind of work on this thing. And she's off, right? Watching things like that, I mean, I just get chills. It's such a beautiful process. And I also know that if my walls had ears, I'm sure they could tell some stories and probably write a book of their own. There's a lot of stuff that people have going on inside that they have absolutely they don't expose, right? We talked last time about social media, and nowadays, even from the filters and the way you can crop and all these other elements of how people try to present themselves. Well, this is my opportunity to not do that at all, because yes, I have a degree on the wall. I have letters behind my name. I have a certification. I have been in practice for more than half of my life. I've had a thriving practice for a lot of years. And you know what? Nothing in the entire scholastic training world would have ever prepared me for my personal life, for all of the things I was about to face as I took that wielding love baton into my relationships. I really do believe that life is a powerful teacher. I believe that. And I think that life often tries to get us to go in certain directions. And whether you call it God, Holy Spirit, Source, Buddha, a tree, I don't really care. But I believe that oftentimes spiritually, we're being led in a certain direction. And it was really only because of that, I think, the spiritual walk, that's part of me getting to a yoga mat, because there was no amount of study that could have ever prepared me for the season that I was going to go through. And it was quite a long season, literally sometimes facing life or death circumstances in my own personal life. Maybe it's because I've gotten a degree from the School of Hard Knocks, some may call it. I get that. And I think it's part of what empowers me to be able to hold space for people and not just say, yeah, I read that in a book somewhere, or Google last night came up, right? Like I can go, I get it. I've got you, right? This awareness that would I have liked to have come through life unscathed? Maybe in the moment, right? But honestly, this awareness that these are the things, it's like testing your muscles. It's like building this physique, right? That this personal physique of being able to get in and actually have worked from the guts of life, right? So as a social worker, I have to do this thing called a CV. It's called a curriculum vitae. I don't know if I would imagine other industries have that. I've only known one industry, but it's it's your degree, it's your courses, your certifications, all to document your level of professionalism. So every time, and by now mine is literally like pages thick, an opportunity for me to kind of declare and document all of the training that I've had. But it's fascinating to me because as I was thinking about my behind the scenes, my life experiences, I started to go, oh my gosh, what if I had to write a personal CV? What if on those same pages, I actually had to document what life has taught me, what my relationships or my dysfunction and my heartache has actually schooled me in? So I made a list, and it's somewhat humorous, but then I'm also like, dang, there's a lot here. If you needed to come in and talk to me about being an empath, being born that kid as the sensitive one who always kind of walked around. I mean, my book's called Misunderstood, for goodness sake, right? Like if you need to talk to me about this element of being misunderstood, sensitive, and in tune with energy and things like that, absolutely. The sense of really never fitting in and understanding like kind of what's wrong with you. Yeah, I certainly have some experience with that. If you want to talk to me about organized religion and kind of the implementing that does to your spirit, and not right or wrong, but just kind of having conversation to help you understand the things that you were taught from a very early age. And then maybe journeying into your own authentic spiritual path. Yeah, it's been quite a process of mine. If you need to talk to me about being overweight, remember I said I walked into that yoga studio very overweight, incredibly overweight, body image issues, using exercise or food to cope. Yeah, completely. That would definitely be on my CV. If you want to talk to me about dating violence and the reality of how, even as a young teen, how that can impact a spirit or a belief system. If you want to talk to me about being a victim of a crime and the lack of justice in our society, yep, I can talk to you all day about that. How about addiction? Yours, someone who you love, and addiction really of any type. Food, alcohol, pills, diet and exercise, right? Maybe you have experienced, maybe you yourself with chronic illness, or perhaps someone that you care about has a chronic illness, and you have found yourself in the position of being the caretaker to really help and manage and escort and soothe someone who has chronic illness. If you need to talk about the reality of being married and what that's like, yeah. If you need to talk about being single, then there too. If you want to talk to me about divorce, if you want to really shed some stereotypes or face stereotypes, try being a divorce therapist and stand in the face of what people think and what people say, sometimes right to your face, right? Whew, our world, right? If you need to talk to me about being a single parent and what that's like to raise kiddos as a single responsibility, maybe there's issues of codependency that you have been up against. I can completely understand that. Having a misguided sense of what love looked like and how it needed to show up. It's the essence of why I wrote Misunderstood. Maybe you have been affected, and my hope is that you certainly have not, but maybe you have been affected by this thing called parental alienation and the way that will slaughter a family. Maybe you've been connected to an addict or perhaps even a narcissist. It is a reality in our world. There's a term called ACOA, and that stands for Adult Children of Alcoholics, or COA, Children of Alcoholics. Perhaps that's something that you're recognizing, like you're just struggling to get life to work. And this realization that perhaps you or someone that you really love has been affected by this thing called addiction. Maybe we need to talk about being a generation's worth of family disease of addiction. They call it a family disease for a reason. It doesn't just affect the person who has it. It is a disease that is wide stretching and impactful to people who actually don't even have it. If you want to talk to me about dating later in life, I can talk to you about that. Or maybe it's the idea of aging. Now, I still have, at least this is my plan, a whole lot of years left in front of me. But this realization that, you start to get to a point in life where things don't always look the same, work the same, feel the same, right? Like your sense of self begins to shift, change. Maybe you've even noticed that they've started to erode in some ways. You want to talk to me about being a business owner? I can do that. An entrepreneur, or maybe even an author. I'd be thrilled to talk with you about that. Maybe it's just the reality of relationships in general, relationships with parents, aging parents, being a friend to people. What about adult children? When kiddos don't need you in the same capacity, how are you doing with that? Is that affecting you? Are you kind of empty nesting, or are you struggling with the idea that they're in a very different season of their life? I shared about my courage to walk into that yoga studio and the way that it transformed my life. And one of the things I also did as a therapist, of course, I've gotten therapy, right? I think it helps us be healthier and a better perspective. But when life is falling apart, you should probably get yourself to a therapist's office, right? And so I did that. And I will also never forget her encouragement to walk into the walls of a recovery meeting, the 12 steps. And for me, it was the 12 steps of Al-Anon. For other people, it's AA. For other people, it's OA, Overeaters Anonymous. But for me, it was the journey of Al-Anon in working the 12 steps, where my personal recovery was able to begin. Just like walking into that yoga studio, I was terrified, horrifically distraught, overwhelmed, and probably in some of the greatest pain I have ever been. But you want to talk about Wobble. I mean, people there who held space for the pain, the anguish, the turmoil, the destruction that happens in the family disease of addiction. Most people had no idea. I would go to work and I would hold space for people, their hard truths, and be compassionate and loving and firm and accountable. And I'd be all these different things. And the truth that almost no one really knew is that my life was riddled with hardship, turmoil, and certainly trauma. I had so much dysfunction and so much devastation from all of this, both sides of it, codependency, addiction, all of it, chronic illness, everything. Because I had applied that level of kindness, love, and helping to most of my relationships, I had kind of found myself lost in these patterns of what probably healthy people would look at as fixing, managing, rescuing, probably very codependent, right? That was the way that I was trying to wield this love baton. I did not have boundaries. I did not have a healthy understanding of relationships in spite of an extensive professional curriculum vitae. What I tried to do is just try harder and harder and harder to fix, save, and rescue people who, quite frankly, had no interest or business being saved, right? I knew the social rules. I know all the things to say and the ways to behave, all of the ways to be really polite about things. But that childhood belief, that naive nature that two halves become a whole, was completely shattered and totally blown out of the water. And though I would go to work every single day and hold this powerful space for people, my world was totally crumbling. And there is a reason they call it a family disease. It does affect people. And if you in any capacity have been affected by yours or anyone else's, I would encourage you to reach out for that hand of help, whether it be AA, OA, if you want to contact me or get on a website or whatever. There wasn't a single corner of my life that hadn't been touched by some form of dysfunction. And it was much of the stuff that my clients were coming in to talk to me about. And the good news is that all of those painful experiences really did offer me a wide array of being able to sit with people, hold space with them. And I realized that both in yoga and Al-Anon, I had the opportunity to evolve or stay the same. It's that point of readiness. And I wonder for you, are you ready? That readiness point propelled me into years of recovery. I'm still active in recovery, hard work, and honestly, some terribly hard decisions. I came to the point because of that readiness and those support systems of Al-Anon, of yoga, of a community of people where I had to make some hard choices and face those realities and really rework my entire understanding of relationships. I will not lie, the process of evolving can be incredibly challenging. Changing the dance you dance with people can escalate you into levels of pain you've really never known. And at times, maybe staying the same would have been easier, but readiness propelled me into that. Are you ready? Is this something that you can relate? Please don't leave me hanging. Are there times in your life where you just wait for the real adult to show up, right? Like, just please, will someone make this decision, right? Will the real adult tell me what I should do? I know I still wait for that most days. Do you have a story of readiness, a story of your own personal awakening where you were finding your path, or are you someone who's still searching? I want to hear your story. I want to know what the struggle is for you to see how we can help you authentically live your life. Was there a situation that absolutely brought out the worst level of pain, the worst level of your dysfunction that has now, years later, turned out to be your biggest lesson, or are you still in the midst of that? So stay tuned because we're going to go ahead and take a break. And I want to offer my contact information one more time. My website's AllysonBlythe.com and it's 859-341-7773. If you want to follow me on social media, it's Allyson Blythe, Life Coach. I am Allyson Blythe, and this is the Ally Effect, Authentically Living Life Your Way. We're going to take a quick break and then reveal just a little bit more before we end for the day. Stay tuned. So we're back here on the Ally Effect, Authentically Living Life Your Way, with me, Allyson Blythe, as we're discussing this whole level of authenticity and helping you see behind the scenes of my so-called professional life. I offered last time a listener question, and I wanted to do that again this time because I think it gives us some really good food for thought. And this question actually echoes the complete reason why I wanted to offer this show. It reads, Allyson, you've been doing this for a long time and you always seem to have it so together. How did you do it? Right? Like, oh, yeah. And here we are today, front and center, to let you know that's actually really not the truth. That was so much of the facade I had been building just for my own survival purposes, right? Not trying to deceive or anyone in any way, but it was survival of trying to get through the day. And the truth is, I'm still doing it. Trying to launch the show and being as authentic as I possibly could was totally a struggle, right? Like, what are people going to think? And what are people going to say? And is this going to be safe? And what am I going to do? Like this tendency to kind of overthink out of fear of that vulnerability. I'm still trying to practice this walk of authenticity. The other thing I know is the community and resources. I shared about the powerful community of yoga and being able to move my body, movement, breath, people who I love, transformation off and on the mat. I would wonder for you, what is your practice for movement and for breath, for introflexion? And where are you with some of that? I don't think change just happens like that. I don't think it comes from the outside. Who are your support systems? Are you in need of a program like Al-Anon or OA or AA? There is a phrase in Al-Anon that they call ODAT, and that stands for 1 day at a time. And I believe that life really does boil down to a series of right nows, just right now, right? 1 day, one moment, one next day, like taking it. If I thought about where I was going to be 15 years ago, if I thought about all this journey, I couldn't have done it. Right? I had to take it 1 day at a time. And sometimes I even needed to narrow it from there, one moment at a time, one conversation at a time, to stay as present as I possibly could be, which is why something like meditation and yoga was so incredibly helpful. If you've ever worked with me or we've done work in any different capacity, you know I am going to tell you pen to paper, right? I believe fully, people will tell me all the time, I don't know how to journal. Like, to me, journaling is like your puke bucket. It's just your opportunity. And I don't care if it's scribbles or words or pictures or paragraphs, proper punctuation. I don't care about any of that. I wonder for you, if you're willing, like, how did I do this? Journaling, truly notebook upon notebook upon notebook that is just meant to be my dumping ground, which really promotes a level of self-discovery and self-awareness, which is one of the tools I talk about. And then also just being real, and being willing to take a risk. I got to the point where I couldn't fake it anymore, right? Like things were crumbling all around me. I had to show up to those places just as real as I possibly could. And the other awareness is that's been an ongoing practice. So for you, how real are you showing up with people? So what I would recommend again is just this awareness that it's an ongoing process. Building a community with support resources, tools, and people. Who are your people? And are you leaning into them? Just like that yoga teacher allowed me to lean into her to stabilize. Who are you leaning into? Are you taking things years at a time, trying to manage the outcomes? Or are you willing to just take it one little step at a time? What are you doing for self-reflection and self-awareness? And then how are you doing? Grade yourself, right? Where are you on that range of just being real about things? So my tips, my hot tips for the week for you to really try to digest is really this idea of learning to embrace the wobble. When you notice yourself kind of going to this level of motion or uncertainty, embrace it. Okay, it's fine. We're all wobbly in life. Every day you have a choice to evolve or remain the same. How can I help you evolve? Is there an element where you can just commit to taking one small action? Walking into that studio, I never had to go back. I just happened to fall in love, right? And so one small action of courage. In Misunderstood, I write about the SOS, the sense of self toolbox. And in that, I offer tools at the very end of the book. There's 2 tools I want to emphasize as we talk about this concept of dropping the veil and showing up real. It's the idea of self-define. I had to rewrite my understanding of what relationships were really, redefine love, redefine relationships, and even the concept of healthy. And you know what else I had to do? Take self-responsibility. It's easy to blame in life. He did, she did, my parents never. Okay. It's important to put those pieces together. And at the same time, my friend, are you evolving? Are you willing to take responsibility for things? I want to know your story. If you've ever had the courage to actually put it down, would you ever write a personal curriculum vitae? Identify what are the things that you faced? What are the challenges? What are the growth opportunities? What are the trainings that you got? If it's worth living, it's worth your attention completely. If you need some help evolving, if a book like Misunderstood, Rewriting the Rules of Dignity and Self-Respect would be helpful to you, please be in touch. If you've got some questions or ways that I can support you even more to help you embrace the wobble, you know how to be in touch with me. AllysonBlythe.com, or an email is always the best, AllysonBlythe@live.com. And talk about one day at a time. If you just want a little media boost every day, Allyson Blythe, life coach. So there you have it. There's the exposure, right? Dropping the veil. I want to thank you so much for holding this space for me and tuning in to the Ally Effect, authentically living life your way, and allowing me the opportunity to practice what I preach so much. You can join me the first and third Thursday right here every single month, 1 o'clock Central Time, 4 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. And the next time on the Ally Effects, I'll talk about another topic that helps us embrace this idea of the wobble and enduring this level of authentically living life your way. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to the Ally Effect with Allyson Blythe. The moment you decide to take control of your own well-being, you start the journey of authenticity. Tune in next time for more empowering conversations and practical tools to help you shed your fear, worry, comparison, and less than beliefs. Stick with us as you step into the driver's seat and head off onto the road of success and happiness. Your best life awaits.